As you come into the farm, feeling the weariness of the journey, you are merrily greeted by a dwarf lady carrying a tray with hot soup and cold ale. Outside the dwarf family house, you can see a few travelers either dining on wooden tables or setting camp. A few purple dragon officers, a group of troubadours carrying the banner of the Chamber of Lords, and a lonely traveler, apparently wounded. What would you like to do? As I stopped talking, each of my players immediately took turns explaining what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. Not 1 second of silence or hesitation. You could feel the excitement and curiosity on their voices. They were eager to talk to those people and uncover whichever wonders and perils they would have to reveal. Quite the Dungeon Master's dream, isn't it? Why were my players so engaged with this social encounter? It wasn't always like that. But when I learned to build my D&D social encounters with clear encounter connections and a clear encounter role, I saw my players' attitude change right in front of my eyes. In this particular encounter, the party was investigating a group of bandits who were making violent attacks on a trading route. They had just arrived at a farm that served as a resting camp for travelers. The party already had a clear encounter goal, which would help the players to take initiative. They knew they were supposed to talk to the travelers to search for information about the bandits. But let me show you how powerful the effect of adding on top of an encounter goal also encounter connections and roles that it brings to an encounter like that. The party was originally hired by the Purple Dragons, the military force of the Kingdom of Cormyr. They carried a mandate letter with the royal seal assigning them this mission. This adventure connection made it compelling for the party to engage on a social encounter with the Purple Dragons officers they saw. After all, the officers were part of an organization they trusted. Our fighter asked to approach them and quietly handed the mandate letter. With that, they immediately earned the officers' trust. The officers mentioned the injured traveler on the camp had been attacked by bandits and would have first-hand information about them. However, my main counter role here was to uncover new information connected to the campaign world. So the officers shared lore about the Stormhorns, which is the nearby mountain ridge that formed a natural protection against invaders on the northern border of the realm, and which would play an important role throughout our campaign. As for our rogue, she wanted to approach the lonely traveler. I mentioned that his trading cart was partially burnt and that he appeared to be wounded. There was, of course, another adventure connection to this social encounter, as the traveler was probably a victim of the bandits. But our rogue pondered the traveler could easily be a disguised informant to the bandits, lurking for their next targets. That made our rogue choose a dubious approach, in which she would overshare information about the party, telling the traveler they were transporting valuable goods and the exact location they would camp next. If the traveler were an informant, she would be throwing a bait for an attack the following night, and the party would be ready. If the traveler were truly a victim, our rogue wanted him to feel compelled to share as much detail as possible about the bandits. That was a lovely approach that showed me how much she was engaged with the adventure, carefully considering her actions and paying much attention to what could be going on. It turns out that the traveler had overheard the bandits saying who was the new bandit leader. The players already knew they had a new leader, but didn't know who he was. This encounter developed and resolved unknown information connected to the adventure. When something like that is revealed, the players immediately understand that it was the main encounter role. that gives them a clear sign that they have succeeded on their encounter goal and may now move on, knowing they're not leaving anything important behind. Finally, our Paladin asked to approach the group of troubadours. As the royal knight he was, he expected them to immediately recognize him as a lord and his order as a trusting one. He would share that he had been asked to escort some merchants and ask about the bandits and for news from the royal court. What made our Paladin want to approach this group was the fact that they were carrying the banner of the Chamber of Lords. That was an important encounter connection to our campaign plot. There was an ongoing dispute between the Chamber of Lords and the Court Royal, which our Paladin was aware of. While the troubadours had no relevant knowledge on the bandits, they shared detailed information about the ongoing political dispute. This encounter role, after all, was to highlight known information connected to the campaign plot. In other words, this encounter was not built to move the adventure forward. Not every encounter needs to do that, after all. Rather, it was placed there to make sure the players would keep on top of their minds important information connected to the overarching campaign. A social encounter is basically a means to convey information, and it helps me a lot to think what I'm trying to communicate with it. In other words, what's its role? Is it to uncover new information, to highlight known information, or to develop known information? Encounters also don't always need to be connected to the adventure itself. I think it's important that some social encounters are better connected to the campaign world or plot. Such connections with different story layers create player immersion and makes the characters' actions as natural as possible because they make the world and the story feel real for them. This approach is, for me, the most effective way to engage my D&D players in social encounters.